that there will be no hospitality given here as they get face stomped into unconsciousness. They wake up in shackles with ritualistic chants roaring above them. People erecting human-sized crosses and a creepy old lady feeding them water. Not exactly a 5-star bed and breakfast. The creepy old lady reveals that she is injured in the same way Luke is. At this point, it's clear that this injury is a mark of ritualistic importance. Unfortunately for Dom, he does not have the mark and is dragged into the attic to be blessed by prayers in preparation for his sacrifice. Yeah, I don't think they were building a Wendy's outside after all. The cult brings Dom back inside so he can have one last chat with Luke before this evening's show. He reveals that earlier in the cabin, when Hutch was alive and pissing himself and he was in the corner crying and screaming the name Gale, that his nightmare was the future prediction that he would end up here, being sacrificed to the monster. It brings a sense of dread and inevitability to the situation, which Dom obviously realizes by saying that he will die here. The monster literally forecasted everything that happened to the group. Its placement of Hutch and Phil's corpses was no coincidence. It was hurting them to the cult to be sacrificed to it. Dom's chilling final request is that Luke burns the place to the ground, that he never stops, that he lives on as best he can, and to tell his wife that he did what he could to get back to her. The cult marches Dom out to be sacrificed, where numerous other corpses are hanging from the trees in full view. The sacrificial cross is actually in the shape of one of the symbols we saw earlier, which translates to elk. In an attempt to rescue Dom, Luke breaks his thumb in order to slip out of his shackles. He gets out of one, but can't get his other hand free. I'm not sure Luke could have done much if he did get free though. This is an important moment for Luke, as he was now ready to take personal injury while fighting for his friends. Despite his best efforts, he's too late. As was foretold in the nightmare, Gale emerged from the woods. Only we know now that the monster has some form of telepathic abilities and is assuming the appearance of Dom's wife, before dragging him into the forest to be hung from the trees. We do get a good look at the monster's face hole, and it's pretty clear this is nothing humans have encountered before. Why hang the bodies from the trees though? What significance does that have? It may be some sort of nod to other Norse mythology, where the god Odin was said to gain knowledge and power by sacrificially impaling and hanging himself on a tree. Why did the monster need the cult to sacrifice Dom instead of just hunting him like Hutch and Phil? Considering all the ritualistic worshipping, it appears to be more of an ego thing the monster has. Killing all of the friends in the woods with nobody to see it is like a basketball team playing with nobody in the stands. It may also be a show of power to the cult, a warning of what happens when they don't worship him. And why did the monster appear as Gale? It may be its ego and need to be revered and worshipped that caused the monster to appear as Gale when killing Dom. Dom revered Gale and the monster wanted to find someone to look at it like how Dom looks at Gale. Another answer is that the monster despises people with good lives, as it cannot easily convert them to a worshipper. It torments Dom by first appearing as Gale, before revealing its true grotesque nature as it kills him. Why did the monster choose Dom to sacrifice and not the others? Possibly because Dom is wounded and is easier for the cult to control. I don't think the cult had the capacity to detain all 4 friends at once. They'd pose too much of a danger. It killed off the stronger and healthier of the friends first. Dom, with his injured leg, was an easier catch for the cult. A younger woman enters the cabin who appears to be the little girl from the picture in the wallet at the abandoned tent the group found earlier. Luke asks if they took Dom's body down from the trees, to which she replies, "We don't move the bodies." She tells Luke that the monster is an ancient Nordic god named Moda, and is the slightly less charming offspring of Tom Hiddleston. The cult worships Moda, and in return it provides them with protection and everlasting life without pain. And if that sounds too good to be true, it's because it is. But it's not like you have a door number 2 to go through. If you don't worship it, you'll end up like Hutch, Phil, Dom, and countless others. We again see that this lady bears the mark that Luke has. When asked why him, she responds that she believes it is because his pain is great. It's now that we're clued in that the god marks those it wants as worshippers, selecting only those with immense emotional baggage. This is another clue that this woman is the little girl from the picture, as she is distant and unsmiling while her family is happy and hugging each other, suggesting that she also carries great pain. Earlier on in the cabin where all the friends had nightmares, these nightmares were most likely caused by Moda gripping their hearts and feeling out which one of them it would choose. Dom was screaming for Gale, possibly suggesting that he missed her and regretted not spending more time with her. Phil was praying to the effigy, possibly suggesting that he had some unresolved issues with a commitment to a religion or higher power. Hutch losing his bowels may suggest that his pain was in losing control, as he was the leader who seemingly always had a handle on the group and was constantly trying to keep them on the path. Obviously, Luke, carrying the guilt from Rob's death at the liquor store, was the one whose heart the monster was most attracted to. The monster clearly herded Luke to the cult instead of killing him, which it had plenty of opportunities to do earlier, so that he could become a worshipper of it. Now, our boy Luke has had some character development over the past hour and 20 minutes. He's not about to take any more shit from Loki's ugly-ass son. He grabs a torch and heads upstairs to check out the congregation. Instead of opening the door to find Benny Hinn, Luke discovers probably the creepiest thing we've seen yet. The worshippers are all mummified remains of elder cult members. He has some serious cojones for walking into that room. I'd just have tossed the torch in and noped right out of there. And remember when I said everlasting life was too good to be true? Yeah, this is Moda's gift in all its glory. It's the hellacious side of everlasting life, as they aged but didn't die, and since their mummified remains can never leave, they are stuck in that attic, forced to worship Moda forever. Well, until Luke mercy kills them by lighting them all on fire, ultimately living up to his promise to Dom. Badass Luke absolutely rocks Granny with a straight right jab, and then grabs a German Kar-98K bolt-action rifle and a couple rounds of 8mm ammo. On a side note, this could be a subtle indication that this monster god has been abducting hikers since before 1935. I mean, obviously Moda's been around for a while since he's an ancient god, but I think it's worth pointing out. Moda returns from the woods, pissed off at his beautiful church being burned down. Luke blasts the creepy bald guy with his newfound rifle, then akimbos the rifle and an axe as he turns around to see Moda in the doorway. Moda drops the super dead eyes gouged out blonde woman to the ground as a kind of see what you caused type of taunt. Earlier on, the blonde woman was looking up at Moda and whispering something to it. We don't know what she said, but I think it's fair to say that Moda is mad and punishing its worshippers for allowing Luke to burn down the elders and its church. She was probably asking for some kind of forgiveness. Luke busts out the back door and heads into the woods, while Moda picks up dead Anna's daughter, presumably to hang her from the trees. He fires the rifle at the monster with his last remaining round. We don't really know if Luke hit Moda with the bullet, but Moda seems to be pretty unfazed. Moda is what you might consider to be big game, which means one 8mm round probably won't do the trick anyways. Realizing this, Luke takes off for the tree line with the displeased monster chasing him down. That damn convenience store shows up again, meaning that he definitely did not lose Moda in the woods. He then gets bucked to the ground by the elk god and now has Luke in his tiny hand's grasp. Just when you think Luke's about to become a tree ornament, Moda tosses him on the ground and starts flexing on him, establishing its dominance like a gorilla beating its chest. As soon as Luke stands up in defiance, Moda quickly shoves him back down into the kneeling position. Luke hallucinates one last time and sees Robert on the ground next to him. Robert turns to look at Luke, almost as a suggestion from Moda that he needs to cowardly submit to Moda like he submitted to the muggers. Now, it might not be those with great pain that the god chooses for worshippers, but instead it chooses those who are most likely to submit to it. we're led to believe that it chooses the biggest coward. I do have some problems with this though, as after Hutch is killed, it's clear that Luke is done being a coward, as he assumed the strong leader role, while Phil on the other hand showed much less mental resolve and arguably would be an easier target. That said, Phil's golden ticket may have been revoked because of his disrespect at the cabin earlier. I don't know though, earlier when they saw the footprints leading presumably to the cult camp, Phil was still alive. Moda may have actually wanted Phil too, but since they didn't take the bait, it decided to kill him. The blonde lady did mention that Moda will take away their pain, so Luke's immense guilt is what might make him the target. In order for Moda to take away someone's pain as a motivation to become a worshipper, that person has to have pain to begin with. It's apparent now that Moda's main motivation is to satisfy its ego by building a group of followers to worship it, much like an Instagram hoe. This is also maybe why it made Phil strip down naked and beg for his life to the headless antler hand effigy for disrespecting it by saying, "I'll pay 1,000 to whoever shacks up with this thing tonight." Back to the movie, Luke says, "Fuck that noise," picks up the axe laying beside him that Moda seems to have forgotten about, and thrusts it into the monster's head, drawing the blood of the ancient god creature. Luke makes it to the tree line where the forest seems to have some sort of electric shock collar fencing that Moda can't go beyond. It could also be interpreted that the monster is also a bit of a coward and all of its shenanigans were a defensive projection of its own cowardice as it hides in the forest and doesn't want to be seen in the open. Luke is barefoot and out of breath. He hasn't had time to grieve his dead friend. He's face to face with a mythical monster. It roars in anger, and Luke, too stricken to feel fear of death, screams back in sadness and defiance. He's no longer a coward, but what does it matter when all of his friends were murdered? How can he even begin to explain or cope with what he has endured? The movie leaves Luke to make his solitary journey back home so that he can be imprisoned, as he's painted as a mentally unstable PTSD-afflicted person who lost his mind and murdered his friends in the forest. What, did you think that they'd really believe an ancient monster god killed them all? What he should have done is kept the axe that he used to draw the god's blood, and then used that as biological evidence of an unworldly creature that attacked them. If you want to know more about how to beat Moda, I'll have a video on that as well. This movie had more depth and raised more questions than I expected, so let me know what you guys thought of it. Thanks for watching. If a highly intelligent parasitic pathogen began infecting and reconstituting your friends into meat monsters, what would you do? In this video on Nerd Explains, we'll follow the characters, see if we can make better decisions, and ultimately attempt to beat the thing in The Thing. If you think you have a better way to beat the alien pathogen, let me know in the comments. If you like these how to beat videos, consider subscribing. We start out following a Norwegian research team in Antarctica, chasing down an unusual radio signal emitting from under the ice. Once on top of the signal, their snowcat breaks through the ice and they drop into a giant chasm. With incredible luck, they aren't killed. They crank on the headlights, revealing what appears to be a spacecraft. I'm guessing the spaceship didn't crash recently, as the ice was frozen back over, and it's unlikely that nobody detected a spaceship hitting the Earth. Since this spaceship crashed and froze a while ago, I see no need to hunt it down in the winter. It sounds stupid to say winter in Antarctica, but the summer is actually significantly warmer and more survivable. Winter can get down to negative double or triple digits, while summer can get up to around 0 degrees. In the winter of 1982 in Antarctica, the temperatures were recorded as reaching a bone-chilling negative 117 degrees. Unless they pack 3 sets of ice picks, ascending 100 to 200 feet of sheer ice ain't gonna happen. Even if they did, they would only have limited equipment and shelter, as the truck with all the gear is in the chasm. Unless their research facility and team members are close by, they're probably dead. Our main protagonist, Kate Lloyd, is in a different chasm, investigating the remains of a thawing 27,500-year-old cave bear. She's a vertebrate paleontologist who's about to get an up-close encounter with a thing the Norwegians found. The team makes haste and takes a chopper to the crash site, where we get some not-so-subtle foreshadowing.
Look at this guy. I mean, how is that even humanly possible?
Kate Lloyd is
How is that even humanly possible?
Kate Lloyd is warned by other members of the team that they need to wrap up their expedition in a few days, as a nasty storm is moving in.
Where's the storm moving in?
And the last place you want to be is cooped up with a dozen Norwegian guys.
This is one girl?
If a scientist created a virus that killed and mutated everyone into dark seekers except you, the last surviving virologist, what would you do? In this How to Beat video, we'll follow Dr. Neville, see if we can make better decisions, and ultimately attempt to beat the Darkseekers in I Am Legend. If you think you have a better way, let me know in the comments. If you like these How to Beat videos, consider subscribing. We start out following the news, with Dr. Alice Crippen giving us the skinny on her new bioweapon against diseases.
You can imagine your body as a highway, and you picture the virus as a very fast car being driven by a very bad man. Imagine the damage that car could cause. But then if you replace that man with a cop, the picture changes, and that's essentially what we've done.
Dr. Crippen mentions that her cancer-killing virus was created by re-engineering the measles virus, and that there have been 10,009 clinical trials in humans so far, all of whom are cancer-free now. It seems crazy and reckless, but it's not. This is called oncolytic virotherapy, and get ready for it. Clinical trials testing a re-engineered measles virus as an experimental cancer therapy is currently underway. It's not as dangerous as you might think, though. The virus is attenuated to only be able to replicate inside of cancer cells. Once the cancer's gone, the virus dies off. The measles virus is a good oncolytic platform because it's inherently more selective and potent against cancer cells. The vast majority of the world's population has been vaccinated for its dangerous effects, and its airborne and bodily fluids transmission methods can be restricted. It isn't without risks, though. One of the main goals of OV creation is limiting the spread and transmission of them. They usually have containment measures, monitoring, and contingency plans implemented. But for viruses like measles, where there's already a widespread population immunity, it can be considered unnecessary. While OVs are generally repurposed from genetically stable viruses like measles, mutations that cause viruses to gain new cell tropisms or lose restriction factors is a significant concern. Due to this evolutionary capacity present in OVs, safety kill switches that are engineered into the virus's genome are being developed. These kill switches are not reliable for the same reason that caused us to create them in the first place: mutations. According to the FDA's clinical trial phases, This virus is in phase 4, so it has completed years of testing in humans. They should know about any dangerous effects of this OV by now. So how did everything go wrong? My best guess is that a black swan mutation occurred, reactivating previously terminated pathology and inactivating kill switches. A pre-existing viral immunity can seriously hinder the efficacy of the OV, which is the case with the measles vaccinations. So it's possible that Dr. Crippen and her team chose to alter the OV to bypass this immunity, increasing the risk of an epidemic spread. This mutated virus could easily jump containment because measles is one of the most infectious diseases in the world. The Crippen virus outbreak wasn't caused by sheer recklessness, it was just insanely unlucky. 3 years later, we see that the world was ravaged by the virus, and nature is starting to consume human civilization. It would appear that containment and contingency plans had failed, but hey, at least they cured cancer. Unless you were part of a tribe living in the Amazon rainforest, this virus would be inescapable. Since this is 3 years post-outbreak, you, or should I say your corpse, would be decomposed into a pile of bones by now, with maggots having picked off the last remaining pieces of flesh attached to your skeleton. NYC is really peaceful now. And to think, all we had to do was get rid of 8 million people. Speaking of, where are the 8 million skeletons? Oh, right. The PG-13 god lifted them all to heaven. I'd like to see an R-rated version where Will Smith is trudging through thousands and thousands of bones littered all throughout the streets and buildings. We start out following Dr. Robert Neville, a military virologist who is tearing up the streets in a Shelby Mustang with an AR-15 in his lap and a German Shepherd in the side seat. Yep. This is how I would envision myself in the apocalypse if I ever made it that far. If you watched my other I Am Legend video where I talk about how to beat Dr. Neville as the Darkseekers, you'll see why Neville surviving this long is highly unlikely. As we'll later see, the Darkseekers, which are the infected that turned rabid instead of dead, well, surprisingly they like the dark. Knowing this, I'd try to swipe some night vision goggles, or better yet, thermal goggles off the military. The virus doesn't seem to have infected animals, which makes sense because measles is not spread by animals. Hunting wild animals drive-by style with a supercharged V8 muscle car seems impractical, but this is 3 years into surviving alone and looks fun as hell. Neville failed to bag a deer in his car, so he tries the stealth approach. I'm not a hunter, but from what I've read, I highly doubt you could sneak up within rock-throwing distance of a wild deer like that, especially with his rifle parts clacking, footsteps, smell, and his dog. At least he's not directly downwind. Using deer traps or just waiting for a deer to cross your path would be more effective than chasing it through the city. Without humans around, the animal population would explode, so it shouldn't be too hard to catch one. Looks like the lioness was the more effective hunter this time. Maybe this was his first encounter with the lions, but knowing they're out here now, I'd be more cautious roaming the streets. Neville did decently well here, as you're supposed to slowly back away with your front toward the lion. If you're wondering where all the deer and wild animals came from, New York City has 3 major zoos that they could have come from. The zoos also house grizzly bears and snow leopards, so it might be a good idea to stop by and see what animals escaped or died. His watch beeps, indicating sundown is approaching, and he knows they mostly come out at night. Mostly. His alarm is set for 5:23. Why not a nicer number like 5:25? He's clearly losing it mentally. Since the sun goes down at 8 p.m. in New York City, he's got 2.5 hours to get home before he becomes the hunted. 2.5 hours is good because if he hit a deer or his car broke down, he could walk the entire length of Manhattan before sundown. Neville returns to his home, which has IEDs surrounding it for defense. He uses vinegar to block his scent so that the Darkseekers can't track him down, which is good because our human scent can linger on the ground or things we touch for many days. What I'm confused about is how did the Darkseekers have that good of smell, and how did Neville know about it? He must have been lucky enough to witness their capabilities early on, or else they'd have found and killed him. Neville's got an excellent stock of food, and the canned food he has can pretty much last his lifetime if stocked correctly. In addition to bagging the occasional deer, he won't be in danger of starving. According to the fridge poster, Neville was a top military virologist working on the Crippen virus, which could explain how he knew about the mutation causing a heightened sense of smell. During Sam's bath, the second beep on his watch happens, signaling lockdown. How are you not going to get a neck crook sleeping like that? Sleeping in the bathtub right next to the window is not a good idea. Sound transmits through windows much more than walls. Brick wall has a sound transmission class rating of around 50, which blocks most loud noises, whereas single pane windows are around 20, which won't even block a normal voice. If Sam gets spooked and starts barking when a dark seeker wanders close by, it's over. His primary defense is not being found. Once they know his location, the dark seekers or any determined attacker could make entry to his home with enough time, energy, and some primitive tools. Neville's setup is basically a brick house, armored windows, some traps outside, and various guns placed around the house. With his military knowledge, all the time in the world, and endless amounts of supplies, I think he can do better. Armored windows are good, but you'd also want to armor the interior walls that joined your house with the adjacent house, as well as soundproof the house with acoustic sound barriers. What he's really missing is a dedicated safe room if shit gets real. He could repurpose one of his rooms and build a reinforced concrete bunker with a door that leads directly outside into the sunlight, so if he is caught, he can safely exit at sunrise. With sunlight coming within 8 hours maximum, you don't really need much in the way of food, water, supplies, plumbing, or power. Neville has a PTSD flashback to the start of the outbreak, where he's trying to get his family out of NYC before the military quarantine. He remarks that the virus went airborne, suggesting that they did originally restrict this transmission method, but the virus had mutated.
The window is still open. We find something in a week or 2 weeks, we can reverse the spread.
Yeah, finding a cure, mass producing it, and distributing it is not going to happen in 2 weeks. Staying in Manhattan because it's ground zero for the virus makes no sense either. Finding the primary case or patient zero is irrelevant. You already know the cause of the disease, how it came into existence, and how it broke containment. It will not help you find a cure at all, but even if it did, it's going to be tough to continue your research with most of the Manhattan residents turning into zombies. With the severity of the pandemic, he should have been evacuated to a nearby Navy ship, like the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, which is stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, where he could meet up with Dr. Rachel Scott. There, they could either set up a makeshift lab to continue research, or just get the hell out of there and start a new society. Damn, Will Smith is jacked. Treadmills indoors is actually smart. You don't want to be at the last round of your sprints when shit hits the fan. You need all the energy, alertness, and prowess possible, especially with fucking lions using Manhattan as a hunting ground during the day. Normally, I'd say get out into the countryside and only make the occasional trips into the city for supplies. But he's trying to use his own genetic innate immunity to find a cure in his basement virology lab. I think it's important to make the distinction of prophylactic versus therapeutic vaccines. Prophylactic is used to bolster the immune system with antibodies ready to fight a potential threat. Therapeutic is more synonymous with cure, as they're used to treat those already infected with a virus by enhancing the immune system's targeting or responsibilities. He's not working on a prophylactic vaccine because it's impossible. To produce a vaccine from someone's blood, a person needs to have the correct antibodies in their system, which know how to fight the infection. Because Neville has an innate genetic immunity, he will never have had an adaptive immune response to the virus, which would have produced Crippen antibodies in his blood. Also, there's no point. As Neville points out later, you could count with your fingers the amount of uninfected without an innate immunity. Even if you could create a vaccine, a highly mutable disease like KV will have a very low efficacy rate. If that wasn't a problem, how would you even get the vaccine to these people? If for some reason he stumbled into a large group of survivors that didn't have a genetic immunity, he should start with studying Darkseeker blood and work to find or develop a weakened form of the virus that could be used as an immunological trigger, which coincidentally is how the measles vaccine was created. Neville is instead trying to reverse the Darkseeker's condition by creating a therapeutic vaccine based on his own innate immunity. This is also impossible, as the immunity is based on his genetics. You could theoretically create a cure by enhancing everyone's innate immune system, but that's not what Neville's talking about. Funnily enough, oncolytic viruses fall under the therapeutic vaccine umbrella, so he could create another Neville OV, which would destroy the existing Crippen OV everyone's infected with, like fighting fire with fire. I mean, why not give it a shot? It's not like you can mess up and kill 7 billion people again. Neville's not using the proper methods to create a cure, but it doesn't matter if he was. The proper methods for creating a cure for this disease would be in the realm of bleeding edge research. Considering this movie was in 2007 as well, I don't think Neville will be making any breakthroughs by himself in a basement lab with no internet to research from or colleagues to work with. Even if he did develop a magical cure that worked, there's the massive problem of mass manufacturing it and forcibly distributing it to the Darkseekers who want to murder and eat you. These aren't your sickly people on hospital beds. You can't just dart them with a cure either, because the other Darkseekers will just brutally murder them. You need to bring them back to a hospital to restrain, monitor, and keep them safe from the other Darkseekers. As impossible as it is, working to find a cure may be the only thing keeping Neville sane in this post-apocalyptic world. Since the cure idea is ludicrous, it's probably time to load the truck with supplies and head out into the countryside. With how easy it is to find Neville as a Darkseeker, even without making a mistake, it's just a matter of time before they find him. Neville is too stubborn and determined though. Locking the door does make sense. It would ensure that no Darkseekers were hiding in or sleeping in the store somewhere, because they'd have to have broken down the windows or door. I've always thought that the most underestimated thing in the apocalypse was entertainment, so you don't go crazy. He's lucky these physical stores still exist. In the future, when it's all Netflix and digital, there won't be any physical movies, music, or games available. If you're planning on making a doomsday shelter, you might want to get a 100 terabyte storage device and load it up with movies, games, and music. You could put enough movies on it to last you a literal lifetime, or you might be able to fit Call of Duty Modern Warfare on it. He's got his map crossing off locations he's looted already. I don't see any pie slicing though. Ideally, you'd want to clear the entire house before letting your guard down. I also think he should have rigged a UV light attachment for his weapon. Having a gun is still necessary for putting them down fast, from a distance or through barriers, but the lamps would be a good close-range mob deterrent. There's another newspaper saying that infected dogs can come out at dusk, probably because their fur gives them some protection against UV rays. I guess KV can be transmitted to animals after all. Neville's broadcasting an SOS message on all AM frequencies. This is a good call. AM is used instead of FM because the lower frequency band means the signal can travel longer distances and penetrate better through barriers like buildings. He's broadcasting at midday every day, but he should also try to have the radio automatically broadcast a message at night. In daytime, the AM signal can travel maybe 100 miles, but at nighttime the signal can travel hundreds of miles by reflection from the ionosphere, a phenomenon called skywave propagation. This would at least triple or quadruple the radius of his SOS message. Like we saw earlier, there's no need to chase down a deer, nor would you even be able to physically. Neville's dog, Sam, chases the buck into a dark building that likely has Darkseekers napping inside. Honestly, if he didn't go after Sam and Sam got killed, Neville would lose it mentally and die. Chronic loneliness can lead to a 15-year shorter lifespan on average, and this is based on a study where human civilization has not been wiped out with you being the last man on Earth. It's safe to say that his dog is the only thing holding him together, and his survival literally depends on Sam's survival. This would be a good time to have thermal goggles with UV lights on your weapon, or if you could rig something together like in Riddick Pitch Black but with UV light tubes. In some cases, you can see recent footprints with thermal goggles, which could indicate where Darkseekers are or where your dog went. Hopefully that was the deer and not Sam. The hand over the light seems to add some suspense, I guess, but the Pentagon MD3R laser light he has can be activated with a pressure pad on the foregrip. He's using a 4x sight called an ACOG, which isn't ideal for urban environments where you're room clearing most of the time. Adding a canted red dot or swapping it for an EOTech with a 3x magnifier would be a better option, and should have been accessible to him. Fuck, that tension when he sees the deer. In his pursuit of Sam, he runs into a group of Darkseekers in a huddle, sleeping while standing to hibernate, supposedly. Like with the zombies in Cargo, why not lie down instead? He finds Sam and manages to not run into a dead end in this dark maze of a building. Neville jumps from the second or third story with a Darkseeker jumping out after him. The Darkseeker's body breaks his fall and burns to death within seconds. He lays a trap to get another specimen for his clinical trials, and one takes the bait. Seems like snaring a Darkseeker pissed off the other members of the Hive. Well, that's fucking terrifying. I'd have blasted that dude right there. The Alpha retreats back into the shadows and Neville transports the subject back to his lab. He injects her with his breakthrough therapeutic vaccine, which fails like the many cures he's tried in the past. Neville remarks in his logs that the recent blood tests confirm he's still immune to the Crippen virus, while canines are immune to the airborne strain only. That's a good move. With how mutable KV is, it's important to continuously test your immunity to it, but you might also want to be wearing better PPE in case the airborne virus becomes infectious to you. It also doesn't seem like a good idea to have been petting your dog after your close encounter earlier, though. He also says that behaviorally, he thinks that the Darkseekers are ignoring basic survival instincts due to declining brain function and food scarcity. Or maybe they just have a social structure and got pissed when you snared one of their people. Sounds humanish to me. Neville has another flashback to their escape in the initial outbreak. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you live in New York City and something like this happens, you're dead. If I was living in New York City, I'd get a paramotor. If shit goes down, you can go to the roof and fly off of it and out of the city. It's a pro-survivor move you'll only hear about here. Going for the bridge gates like the other 8 million infected and panicking people isn't a good idea. But Neville has a military escort. At the evacuation points, they're using eye scanners to detect capillary damage in the eyes.
No good. No good.
What?
I am Lieutenant Colonel Robert Neville. I'm ordering you to scan her again. Scan her again!
All right, scan her again.
Wow, what an effective testing tool. By now, the virus is spreading like wildfire. People are turning into Darkseekers, and the military is blowing up bridges with missiles. If the threat is that severe, you would not be using a low-accuracy testing tool, which is letting the infected slip out of the city. You would quarantine it immediately. Nobody out. For VIPs like Neville, who's a top military virologist, you don't have them run for the border like everyone else. You evacuate them immediately, and then quarantine them at a secure destination, like the Navy ship I mentioned earlier. Neville is driving home at sundown per usual, but he sees Fred in a place he's not supposed to be at. Fred's head turning is just Neville's hallucination from personifying them so much. A sane mind would recognize this as a trap, but Neville's not only underestimating their intelligence, but has clearly lost it mentally. Getting snared, banging his head, knocking him unconscious, the fall, getting shivved by his own knife. This evening is not going well. He needs to get his ass moving though. He tries to pull the knife out, but it's actually better to leave the knife in because pulling it out could allow cut blood vessels that are being squeezed and blocked by the knife to begin bleeding profusely. With this Darkseeker utilizing dogs to get him, it's clear Neville seriously underestimated them in his behavioral assessments. He almost gets his throat ripped out, but Sam fights off another dog and tackles the one attacking Neville. Unfortunately, Sam got bit. God damn, this is hard to watch. He brings Sam back to his home and injects her with a potential cure that appeared successful on a test rat, but the compound is unsurprisingly ineffective. Seconds later, Sam becomes fiercely aggressive and attempts to bite Neville. To save himself and spare Sam the pain and suffering of being a canine Darkseeker, Neville is forced to strangle her. I'm gonna go hug my dog now. Sure, Neville could have restrained Sam until he found his fictional cure, but I think he wanted to spare his dog the agony. The emptiness, loneliness, and irreversibility is just crushing. I don't know how much willpower he has left to survive at this point. Neville goes full suicidal rage mode, trying to take down as many with him as possible. Before he's killed by the Alpha, he's rescued by another survivor who heard his call on the radio. If only she came a day earlier. Before slipping into unconsciousness, he manages to tell her his house address and that she needs to keep driving until dawn so the Darkseekers can't track them home. Flashback, and his wife and son are killed in a helicopter crash because another heli flew into them. Thanks, brain, for that lovely dream. He wakes up and his rescuer had patched up his knife wound, given him some antibiotics, and fixed him breakfast. This woman is a goddamn angel. Neville gets pissed when Anna gives him what he thinks is false hope, that there's a survivor colony in Vermont. Anna says that the virus can't survive the cold up there, which is a little misguided. Cold temperatures can decrease the viral activity, but inversely can increase the survivability of measles-like viruses. but the virus will persist if it's inside a host regardless of weather. The incidence of the KV disease is more likely to be affected by the amount of sunlight exposure in an area, as well as human behavior and density. Anna's really quick on the draw. That was actually impressive. Ethan was quick to draw a knife too. Good to see he's not a typical useless or rebellious child. Neville starts the nightly lockdown procedure, and Anna tells him that the next morning they're heading to the survivor colony.
There's a whole colony of people there who didn't get sick. The virus couldn't survive the cold. There's a whole...
Everybody's dead. Everybody is dead.
Yeah, the numbers don't look good, but there could be a survivor colony. It's only a 4-hour drive to Vermont, at least check it out. Even if you stupidly wanted to continue research at your ground zero, you could cooperate with them and cure your loneliness. Going to Vermont is off the table anyways, because the Darkseekers managed to track them back home. Based on the numbers, you're potentially dealing with thousands of Darkseekers. Those window barriers are probably meant to prevent Darkseekers from randomly breaking in, not for stopping a determined attack. His setup was bound to fail. If you did want to do exterior light setups, you'd want the light to have 360 degrees of coverage so they couldn't just walk up behind the pole and take it down. His IED looked like C4 attached to fuel drums. It would have been much more effective to tape ball bearings or nails on the outside of the container to increase fragmentation. The blast killed a lot of them, but the Alpha survived and tackles him to the ground. Instead of immediately snapping Neville's neck with his superhuman strength, he just throws him around, which gives Neville an opportunity to fight back. Neville finds Anna hiding under a bed from a Darkseeker, grabs a pistol, and pumps it full of lead. A normal person can shrug off 9mm rounds in the heat of the battle through adrenaline if they aren't hitting critical locations. So these Darkseekers are not going to be phased until you